All right, guys, what's going on? It's Jack, and welcome back to another video. And now with the holidays literally creeping up around the corner, I think it is time for me to make a 10 Halloween or horror movies list that I recommend you either come back to watch once a year around this time, or if you haven't seen them, to watch. Now, first of all, I know that not everybody's into Halloween. I know that not everybody's into horror films, which is why this list is specifically designed to have like movies that are legitimately scary, ones that are a little bit more lighthearted and in between, something a little bit lighter, and of course, you've got your movies that are might as well not be horror movies at all, but are a fun watch and are Halloween themed, so therefore they make the list, right? So basically what I'm trying to tell you is you've got hot, medium, and mild on this list, okay? So there's a little something for everybody. So in order to keep this video from being too long, let's get started with the list. The first movie starts out with a very lighthearted film that is actually funny. Scary Movie. The original Scary Movie that came out in 2000, in my opinion, not only still holds up very well to this day, but is still the best of the bunch. And it is legitimately rated R, because I think starting in Scary Movie 3, they went PG-13, and it's basically a parody of these scary movies that were made around that same time. You know, you guys remember Not Another Teen Movie, to where they were making fun of teen movies in a very raunchy R-rated fashion? Well, it's the same exact premise here, except it revolves around making fun of scary movies. So if you liked Not Another Teen Movie, this is the, scary movie edition. There's a lot of laughs to be had. There's a lot of adult themes to be had. There's some chuckling here and there. And, the 2000 vibes is really, really strong with this one. So if you like the movies that came out in that area, and if you don't mind the raunchiness and the of how they make fun of these movies and stuff like that, I highly recommend you give this one a shot, because it is a fun movie to watch, and it is one that I like to come back to frequently. All right, next up we have Child's Play, and I'm going with the original on this one because, in my humble opinion, without trying to be too biased or anything here, the original one has yet to be surpassed. And obviously they've gone in the ways of horror and stuff like that. And for those of you guys that don't know, Child's Play, the premise of Child's Play is basically a serial killer transforms his soul into a toy doll, and this toy doll wreaks havoc, goes after the child and the mom and stuff like that, and people don't believe the kid, of course, and etc. And the way it is executed in this particular film that came out in the late 80s, if I'm not mistaken, is executed very well. To this day, the tone of the original Child's Play, aka Chucky film, is executed extremely well. And obviously you see how everything started and how it came to be. And I highly recommend this film. It is a classic and definitely worth watching. And it is a horror movie. Yes. All right. Next one up is one that I saw when I was 12 years old, introduced to me by my cousin, and it actually scared me. And I did not want to move when I was watching it, but I was still intrigued because I wanted to see the movie all the way through. And that movie is Candyman. So Candyman, the premise of Candyman is you have this man who is an artist back in, I think, the late in the 1800s or something like that. And he's the son of a slave who actually is a very talented artist, but fell in love with a white woman. And apparently people did not like that, and they went after him, and they sawed off his right arm, or his right, hand or something like that. And basically put honey all over him, and a swarm of bees basically came and killed him. And basically they were calling him Candyman because of the honey, right? So and the legend ended up being that if you say his name while looking at a mirror 5 times, he comes out and kills you with a hook, replacing his hand. And that is the premise of the story. And the tone of the film in terms of its score, Tony Todd's performance, the supporting characters' performance, everything. Like, this movie will grip you and it will not let go. The story is told very well. The way the movie grips you in terms of the theme and everything like that, and how the actors portray everything is done very, very well. And when you see somebody in the film that's making the mistake of daring to say the name 5 times in the mirror, is something that you're like, oh crap, it's coming, or something like that, or how is it going to happen now? It's I like I said, I was 12 years old or 11 years old when I first saw this. and it stuck with me. And all these years later, it is still a classic. So yes, this is a classic horror film. It is meant to give you the chills. It is meant to stick with you and make you think. And to this day, I still know people that will not say his name 5 times in the mirror. So with that being said, yeah, that is definitely another one worth watching if you're into that sort of thing. All right, next one up is very obvious and has yet to be surpassed ever since the 1970s, and that is the original Halloween. John Carpenter's Halloween is a classic. Michael Myers has stood the test of time all of these years, and there have been sequels that have been good, and there have been sequels that have been bad, and there have been sequels that have been like, huh, what is this? You know, so but the original Halloween, a lot of people will say, has yet to be surpassed. I don't think I really need to say anything more. Everybody knows the story of Halloween, so obviously you can't leave out the timeless classic out of this list. All right, we're gonna go on to the next one, Friday the 13th Part 6. Now, there's one reason specifically that I chose Friday the 13th Part 6. One is obviously that I think it is probably the best of the bunch, right? There's been like, I don't know, 10 or 11, 12 maybe Friday the 13th films that have been made. And Part 6 is arguably the best one, depending on how you look at it as a fan. Now, the reason why I say it's the best one is because, well, Friday the 13th movies are, you know, they've got the horror element in there, of course, but at the same time, you've got that teen type of humor, right? A whole bunch of teens or college students or something like that going to the lake. They're doing all these naughty things, and then they kind of get, you know, taken out one by one by Jason, right? And the question is, okay, how many of them are going to be taken out and all that kind of stuff. And of course, you see all these teens or young people making these classic horror movie mistakes that make you go, yep, this person's definitely going to get it eventually in the film, and usually they do. And how it happens is another thing that kind of, you know, and Friday the 13th Part 6 is one that pretty much represents, like, it's not meant to be taken seriously, but at the same time, it is a worthy entry into the entire entire Friday the 13th saga, because it still retains of what put Friday the 13th on the map in the first place. Granted, it's not as a serious of a movie, but when the movie actually does have its serious moments, it executes it really well. So this is like a middle of the pack in terms of how much of a horror movie it is. It is a classic. It came out in the late 80s, if I'm not mistaken, mid to late 80s. And again, to this day, a lot of people will say that it is arguably the best one. And if it's not the best one, it is top tier for sure. All right, next up, this one is a top tier horror movie. It is a classic at this point. Saw really surprised me. Like, it's like, Saw is kind of like a puzzle, right? And that's how it is presented in the movie, especially when you look at the ending. The ending really, I'm not going to spoil it, but the ending really surprised me. And basically didn't see it coming. And obviously they've made so many more movies. You know, you've got the traps in there, but at the same time, you always had the story that was at the center of it all. And every single movie was like, there were like different pieces of the puzzle that were put together in every single movie, right? So it's like you had to watch the entire saga to see all the in-between stuff that is happening, you know, how everything would end, how everything came to be, and all that kind of stuff. And the first one, a lot of people believe, is the best of the bunch. So that is why I put it on the list. And yeah, definitely one you should watch. It is a horror movie. It is through and through. And at this point right now, yeah, it is a classic. All right, next up, one that I would see again when I was 11 or 12 years old, and that is Pet Sematary, that released in 1989. Not the newer one that was more recent, but the 1989 Pet Sematary. Now, the reason why I am, you know, putting this one on is because I went to see my best friend at the time. He after elementary school, we kind of, you know, went our separate ways because he moved in a town about 2 hours away from where I lived. However, after our sixth grade year in school, I went and visited him for like a couple weeks, and we ended up going to Blockbuster, and guess what? We decided to rent Pet Sematary. I've never seen Pet Sematary. And, you know, his parents were cool with it and stuff like that, and everything like that. And we ended up watching Pet Sematary, and holy crap, did it stick with me. Let's just say I had a little bit of trouble sleeping that night, you know, plus I wasn't home, so I was a little bit out of my comfort zone. But it was definitely a movie that we stood up very late and we watched, and, you know, we were having our snacks and everything like that. Holy crap. Pet Sematary is a movie that, you know, obviously it was done with a lot of makeup and practical effects and stuff like that. And, you know, so basically the premise of the movie is, you know, you basically have this, you have like a tragedy that'll happen in somebody's life, and there's the legend of this Indian burial ground that if you bury them, they'll come back to life, but they don't come back the same, and hence, the the element of it. So definitely, it's a Stephen King. It's a Stephen King book, based off of a Stephen King novel. And yeah, it definitely, everything from the performance of the actors to the score of the film and to the really good makeup job, I would say this film is definitely a horror movie through and through, and it is a classic at this point. All right, next up, a lighthearted film. One that basically represents Halloween to me in many different ways, and I'm actually surprised that it was not directed by Tim Burton, and that is The Addams Family. The Addams Family is, well, at least to my knowledge, it's not directed by Tim Burton. It kind of makes me want to look up whether or not it's directed by Tim Burton, but I don't think it is directed by Tim Burton, but it looks like a Tim Burton film for sure. And the Addams Family, to me, like, obviously you've got Lurch, you've got, the relationship with Gomez and Morticia, you've got the kids and stuff. You've got Thing, which is, the hand that kind of crawls around everywhere. That actually kind of reminds me of a spider bot now, thinking about it. But the one thing that sticks out to me about Addams Family, especially looking back at it now, is Raul Julia's performance as Gomez. Like, he had this charisma about him. He had this energy about him. And absolutely, in my opinion, he is the standout of this film. Now, granted, there's a lot of things in the film that kind of stand out, but the one that takes them all, in my opinion, is Raul Julia's performance as Gomez Addams. And, he definitely showed his energy in this film. And definitely one you can watch with the kids or whatnot, or to, have, kids watch this. I mean, obviously every kid when I was growing up watched this. Yeah, Addams Family is a classic, and there are still many people to this day that will dress up for Halloween as the characters of the Addams Family. And yeah, definitely one worth watching. All right, next up, we have Final Destination. Now, Final Destination was really unique, not only because of the time that it came out when I was like still in high school or somewhere around there, or right before high school, but it was because I think the premise of the movie is really cool. So a guy has a premonition that he and a bunch of other people or whatnot are going to die, and then he wakes up, and then he starts to see that some of the things that he saw in his premonition before everything went to hell, basically were like literally starting to happen. So he basically freaks out, and he's like, he changes it. Basically, he and a group of people end up cheating death because things ended up, he didn't end up going with the way he saw in the premonition, obviously, right? So, and basically, since he cheated death basically kind of came after him, as well as everybody else who survived that was actually meant to die, during that time. So I think that was really cool. I thought even back then it was like a really good premise. And the cool thing about the film is that you think that some characters are going to go in a specific way because that's what the movie is kind of alluding to. But then all of a sudden, out of nowhere, it's like, oh, wow, I totally didn't see that coming. You know what I mean? So Final Destination is very, very clever. And all the movies that have ever come out were all unique. But of course, I had to name the first one, because if it wasn't for this one, we wouldn't have had as many sequels as we did. Some were better than others, but for the most part, all the Final Destination films are definitely a fun watch. They're definitely kind of like a classic horror at this point, which is so hard to believe, but it's absolutely true. And again, the premise is always great, and there are talks to this day about a possible sixth film, and I hope it happens, because Final Destination is unique in and of itself. All right, and the last one on my list is Monster House. Monster House, I actually ended up seeing Monster House when I was in my early to mid 20s for the first time. And I was teaching martial arts at the time. And whether it was on a Friday on a school day or something like that with the after schoolers, or whether it was during summer camp, there would be a library of movies. We would have some movie time going on, at least once a week or something like that, or during lunchtime or something like that, or during some downtime. And one of the movies that we ended up watching was Monster House. And I'd never seen Monster House, and Monster House was really well executed. Like, I was in my early to mid 20s seeing the film for the first time, and I was really, pleasantly surprised of how well it was put together. And it's not something that will be like scary unless you're like 4 years old or something like that. But again, you know, I've seen 4 years old like not being scared with this film. But anyway, but with that being said, it is in my opinion, it is just done very, very well. It is a very underrated film. I mean, well, I don't know how popular it was when it released, but all I know is that this movie is aged very, very well. And I remember I even saw Chris Stuckman doing a review of this movie recently, if I'm not mistaken, and it is one that kind of reminded me of just how good it is. And as a matter of fact, I have the DVD myself, you know, in my collection, and the reason is because I thought it was that good when I saw it, and I'm like, yeah, it's definitely a movie that I'm going to revisit, so therefore I might as well get it on DVD. And I did so, and I certainly don't regret it. And in my opinion, all these movies on this list, and I think they're like worthy of a collectible, depending on whatever type of movie you like to watch. And I'll tell you right now, let's see, Scary Movie I don't have, Child's Play I don't have, Candyman I don't have, Halloween I don't have, Friday the 13th Part 6 I do have, Final Destination I don't, Saw I don't, Pet Sematary I don't, Addams Family I do have, Monster House I do have. So there's 3 movies on this list that I have in my personal DVD collection. And those are the kind of movies that I particularly enjoy watching. I enjoy lighter-hearted, Halloween movies or horror movies, but at the same time, the other ones that I mentioned on this list are definitely worth a watch if you are into like legit horror. So with that being said, guys, let me know what you think of this list. Does this list bring you back some memories of some of these films? Obviously, this is not the end-all be-all list because we will have Halloween again in another year. So I look forward to making another list in a year from now. So with that being said, I hope you enjoyed this video. I hope you guys enjoy your Halloween coming up here in a few days as of the recording of this video. Stay safe out there. And remember, guys, leave the trick-or-treating for the kids. Okay. And I'll catch you guys in the next one.